When you play the game of drones, you play to win or you die. There is no middle ground. No, I'm not Cersei. One more time. Cersei. Who the heck is Cersei? When you play the game of drones, you play to win or you die. There is no middle ground. No, I'm not Cersei Dronister. I'm Denise Howell, and you're about to watch a special drone episode of This Week in Law with Terry Miller, Keith Strier, and David Frankel.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twill, This Week in Law with Denise Howell, episode 284, recorded December 5th, 2014. Game of Drones. This episode of This Week in Law is brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron will send you all of the ingredients to cook fresh, delicious meals with step-by-step instructions right to your door. See what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's blueapron.com/twit. And by Harry's. For guys who want a great shave experience for a fraction of what you're paying now, go to harrys.com. And just in time for the gift season, for new and existing customers, get $5 off the limited edition Winter Winston set by entering the code TWILHOLIDAY at checkout. And by FreshBooks, the simple cloud accounting solution helping millions of small business owners save time billing and get paid faster. Join over 5 million people running their businesses with ease. Try it free at freshbooks.com/twill. Hi, folks. I'm Denise Howell, and you're joining us for This Week in Law, and we are so excited to have you here this week. We suggest that you perhaps grab a hat or a helmet because low-flying unmanned objects might buzz through your neck of the woods or mine at any moment, and that's what this show is going to be primarily about. We're going to talk all about drones, drone law, and policy. We have an amazing panel of folks gathered together here to do that. Let me introduce you to them right now. Joining us is Terry Miller. Terry was once a Marine. He was in the Signals, Intelligence, and Electronic Warfare Division of the Marines. He went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with degrees in professional aeronautics, aviation business administration, and aviation safety. And for the last 20 years, he's been in the aviation insurance industry. So, Terry, you know just about everything there is to know about the risks and hazards involved in using drones, both personally and professionally, I would imagine. And we cannot tell you how grateful we are that you're joining us here today.
I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here. We do, right now we're insuring about 2,500 drones for all uses all around the world, and looking forward to this discussion.
Me too, very much so. Also joining us is my friend and sort of neighbor, distant neighbor here in Orange County, California, Keith Strier. Keith is a partner at Ernst & Young, which all the cool kids are calling EY these days. He advises companies on innovation and digital strategy. And also relevant for our discussion today, since we are here on This Week in Law, is the fact that Keith graduated from the New York University Law School, though he's not a practicing lawyer. Keith, great to have you.
Thank you. It's really exciting. It's such a great topic. It's so timely. We're going to probably run out of time with all the different things going on, and I'm looking forward to digging in.
So Keith has been focusing in his practice on drone use in business settings and has been researching and following a lot of people online who have smart things to say on the law and policy of drone use, and put me together with both Terry and our next guest, David Frankel, who is a drone lawyer, also an IP and technology lawyer. Hello, David.
Hello. Well, about a year ago, I participated with some other lawyers who were concerned about drones nationwide, and we prepared a model form of drone law There were two sections. One was to advocate, not my position, but to advocate for a ban on drones. And my position was to advocate for reasonable regulation of drones with a focus on protecting personal privacy. So I've been active, even though there are no official drone regulations yet. My personal focus is on private property and personal privacy rights, and how drones as a disruptive technology might change some of those things.
That is fantastic, because that's, of course, a huge issue in this area. What I thought we might do, just to sort of kick things off and set up the rest of the discussion, is get people thinking about, we all have seen, at least I think this is how most people become familiar with drones, is the holiday season is upon us. If they're not already a part of the little people in your lives world, they probably be. Here's the latest addition to our drone collection recommendation from Padre SJ. This is the SEMA X5. We're really enjoying this one. We've had a Parrot AR drone in our family for a while. So perhaps, everyone is familiar with the fun recreational uses of these technologies, but it goes much, much further than that. Keith, why don't you give us an overview? And again, we only have a 2-hour show, so you may have to stop yourself at some point, of some of the various uses that may be non-obvious.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's start with just a definition of what is a drone, and maybe go up a level and abstract it to discuss the context for drones and why they're so fascinating and becoming so timely. Drones are just a device, right? They're just a machine. And for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to talk about the aerial vehicles, the ones with rotors and wings, and they're flying around. And there's a lot of activity and interesting developments related to the FAA. But drones do more than fly. Drones have wheels, and since you're showing off something, I'll show off one too. So you've got, the little sumo jumper here, with a pretty nice little camera in the front. And then, and drones also glide. There's a lot of interesting things going on in the marine world with drone boats. And drones are even starting to slither. Actually, I had read an article recently about Carnegie Mellon, which has developed a robot snake, robo-snake, essentially, which slithers through, the passages in a nuclear power plant, for example, looking at, the wirings and other things that are very hard to get to. So, there's a lot of technologies that are essentially will be drone-like. Interestingly enough, the Oxford, if you look up drone in the Oxford English Dictionary, and I happen to have it open here, you got a number of definitions like, making a low continuous humming sound. The one I like most is a male bee in a colony of social bees, which does no work. And I think we could probably have a whole nother show on that one. But you eventually get to a remote controlled pilotless aircraft. And again, I think that's probably a definition that needs to be updated. And I think the concept of drone is going to expand, but it has, it's been essentially a military sector for a number of years, and it's quite a large, robust $20+ billion sector, and then it's become toys. This very interesting consumer sector, and I don't know the actual number. I've seen various numbers quoted around $1 billion or something of that nature. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but there are a lot of companies, some that we've never heard of, and some that you have, that sell this consumer sector. And what's really interesting is between the consumer sector and the military sector, there's been practically no commercial sector. The enterprise use of drones in a way that solve business problems, or at least nothing meaningful until recently. In the last year or two, at least in the U.S. And I think that's really the interesting story. So this technology kind of jumped right from the military to the consumer side and skipped right over commercial, but that's changing rapidly. And what's really interesting about it is that the volume of activity and interest really just in the past 6 months, which is really, to be frank, is about as long as I've been looking at the space, has gone from moderate to crazy. And I think that the level of innovation in the electronics, as well, the avionics, the connectivity, the actual infrastructure, as well as awareness levels on how these devices can be used to solve specific problems, has changed the landscape really just in a matter of months. And you see that in reflection with the FAA, going from being fairly silent on the topic to making several public announcements and then some regulations that are forthcoming. And I think David's recognition earlier that this is becoming a robust field, even in law, his field. I had read an article recently that a number of the top law firms in Washington, D.C. that were active in lobbying had established their own drone practices. They didn't have these before, but now they do. The drone. I mean, these are large, established, well-known law firms that are now opening up drone departments and that kind of thing. So it's really interesting. But to get right down to brass tacks, you have this construct called the Internet of Things or Internet of Everything. And, it's the concept of everyday objects having network connectivity and having the ability to transmit, send, and receive data. And the drones are just one of those things. Wearable computing, smartwatches, smartphones, tablets, cameras that are attached to your house. I mean, all these things, the e-refrigerator, you could go down the list. These are all devices. These are all vectors on the grid. And what makes drones so interesting is that these are vectors that move. You don't nail them to the wall. You don't put them on your wrist, although your wrist moves. But the fact that they could fly and go, and navigate and go from a location A to B does introduce a tremendous amount of commercial opportunity and commercial risk. And I think that's what's so interesting about the story.
It is. In prepping for the show, I found a website called dronespeak.com, which is fairly useful, has lots of overview kind of information. In fact, they have a whole navigational tool on their site that lists a whole bunch of different uses. You hit on a bunch of them, Keith, using them underwater. I hadn't really thought about underwater drone use, but they talk about a whole aquaculture utility for drones, agriculture, emergency response, the environment, exploration. That one's fairly obvious and interesting, of course. Infrastructure, media, real estate, security, transportation, and I guess that would take into account the whole pizza and taco and package delivery arm of this.
The taco culture.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
I just wanted to add, Denise, that as we were looking at that website that lists the different kinds of activities that are impacted by drones, whether it be rescue services, commercial activities, really that website should only have one big word on it, the word everything. What we're dealing with here is a major disruptive technology. And with due respect to Keith's comments, I have to disagree in the sense that I don't feel this is just an add-on of us living in the big internet world. Almost 50 years old now. I've lived through, this is my third major disruptive technology. The first one was personal computers when I was back in high school. The second one was the internet. And this is the third one. And this is for real. There is no part of our life as human beings on this planet that will remain untouched by the development and evolution and adaptation of unmanned vehicles, unmanned boats, unmanned helpers, everything. And whether you call them drones or UAS or UAV, it doesn't really matter. Most people call them drones. But I really want to emphasize, this is not just an area of explosive growth. This is something that is fundamentally changing our society from a technology standpoint. And I just want to list off just 2 or 3 items. It used to be very expensive for the average person to fly. Helicopters and airplanes are expensive. We've heard of the detailed requirements from Terry talking about the different certificates and requirements for insurance and the like. But what we have to realize now is that these things come in all shapes and sizes, that it is no longer expensive to fly anywhere you want, that the old rule about not having any privacy rights in your backyard if you can be viewed in, quote, plain sight, well, that's something that will need to be looked at. A lot of fundamental rules need to be looked at because courts have decided in the past that overflights were very expensive and therefore people shouldn't worry about their privacy rights in overflights. And now we need to re-examine those. So I also want to mention one other thing before I give the floor back.
Sure.
We were talking about military applications and how that might impact people. I don't know if people are aware of this phrase spiffing, I believe it is. That's when a third party without authorization hijacks the radio signal of a remote controlled vehicle or aircraft. There have been at least 2 experiments from, I believe, University of New Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, where students were able to commandeer a remote control flying UAV. And this gets into a lot of issues. So I just want to put it out there that everything in our society is affected, that lawyers, business people, insurance people, consumers, politicians, government regulators, everyone needs to take a look. And there's often jokes about responsible droning. And when people say, oh, well, that's silly, I say, well, what kind of droning are you in favor of?
Yeah, absolutely. You certainly wouldn't want a whole lot of reckless droning going on, or you'd find yourself living in a Neil Stevenson novel, which all of these discussions always put me in mind of. And it is up to us and the decisions that lawmakers and policymakers make right now, whether the future of these technologies is utopian or dystopian, or at least, somewhere in between, we would hope. Also, the whole visual arts is one that they mentioned. So using them both personally and commercially to capture video. And then I'm sure there are other applications that we're not even hitting on here, but there's just so much that I think we're just now at the verge of that we can explore. Before we go too much further, I just want to make sure, Terry, I thought this background tidbit of yours working in the signals intelligence arm of the Marines in electronic warfare. I'm sure there's not too much you could tell us about that as we sit here today, but it gives you a very fascinating background.
Well, it was a long time ago. I was stationed, it was intercepting Russian communications, Morse code and language, based in Naval Security Group activity in Adak, Alaska, out in the Aleutian Islands. So it's during the Cold War, and most of our collection went to NSA. But our background did deal with, it was primarily underwater submarines and aircraft. That was also one of the primary locations that did the intercept of Korean airliner 007 shoot down over the Bering Sea or Bering Strait.
Wow. Well, it's a good thing you're moved on from that, because otherwise I would be concerned that, something might be circling outside and ready to come get us as we're doing the show. Because, of course, and as Keith was pointing out, we have the military and consumer sectors of drone use well covered. And in the military arena, which is probably beyond the scope of where we're going to go today, but it just bears mentioning that it's really a burgeoning area as well. The whole question of whether something that has attack capabilities is capable of autonomous decision-making or not, and all of the abilities that military technology is taking on today. Is there anything, before we start talking more about business, because I think that's what we're going to mostly focus on today, is there anything on the military front related to unmanned vehicles that you think it's notable, or any lawmaking developments that you think we should know about?
We deal primarily with commercial development and commercial use. However, we do insure a number of developers, manufacturers that use military equipment, General Atomics, AeroVironment equipment that we're insuring right now that for research and development. And so I think that there will definitely be some of that technology, depending upon bandwidth and what type of bandwidth of communication systems we have available to us in the commercial world. So we do deal with the different types of equipment. It's the uses primarily that determine what we're handling here in the U.S. So although we do crossover on the equipment, the uses are commercial, R&D, law enforcement, municipality, industrial uses.
Right. David and Keith were talking about how the whole area of drone use has led to this explosion of opportunity in the legal field, with law firms quickly adding a practice group in drone law, that kind of thing. You said you have over 2,500 drones that you're insuring at this point?
Yes, we started off, we're one of the largest insurers worldwide of aerial film production. So, and those would be manned aircraft used in the production of major motion pictures, commercials, things like that. About 2 years ago, some of our larger clients in the film production industry came to us and wanted some assistance, or they indicated they wanted to start using drones for film production. So we, in order for us to insure the production company or the production in general, we needed to find a way to place some primary coverage on those aircraft. So 2 years ago, we began insuring those for very specific uses in film production. And then over time, we've evolved our aircraft and aviation policy forms to cover drones of all sizes, from DJI Phantoms right now up to pilot optional aircraft, dual crew pilot optional aircraft. So because of our knowledge of aviation and aircraft risk management, we've been able to revise the policies. They fit very well just the way they are. We just had to remove some things related to federal aviation regulations, things like airworthiness, things like pilot medical requirements and airworthiness certificates. Some of the biggest issues that we've had, frankly, are that most of these aircraft that are built do not have serial numbers. So we've essentially had to invent this industry from the ground up. We've had to develop our own data plate. As far as aircraft go, we can insure a data plate, which is just a small plate with a serial number on it. We can insure the data plate without an aircraft, but we can't insure an aircraft without a data plate. So we had to invent the data plate. We had to verify the existence of the aircraft, try to come to some conclusion of whether or not it's airworthy. And since then, we've developed it from one insurance company to 10. We're insuring 2,500 worldwide for all uses, commercial through industrial and the energy industries. So it's been explosive growth in a very short period of time.
Tell me about the pilot medical requirements that you just mentioned. Do you have some minimum remote pilot competency and health requirements involved in issuing your policies?
We don't know, but the aviation insurance policies, an aircraft insurance policy, in order to maintain a pilot certificate, you have to have a medical certificate as well. And so, ironically, or what most people don't understand about aviation insurance policies is they do not and never have excluded FAR, Federal Aviation Regulation violations. In other words, if you have a loss and that results in an FAA regulation violation, we would still cover the loss under the policy, provided it was the loss occurred while the aircraft was being used for the approved uses under the policy and operated by the pilots approved under the policy. Other than that, so the aircraft policies, we've had to remove certain sections, like must have a current medical, must have an airworthiness certificate, because these aircraft do not have them. Right. And those were the only regulations addressed in an aviation insurance policy. So we endorse them out of the policy and then arrange it to fit the aircraft and the use. But we do collect pilot data. One of the reasons is over the past 2 years, we have a pilot experience form. We want to know we want to compare pilot experience, pilot background, pilot training to loss ratios and losses that occur, so that hopefully we can develop some criteria to determine what makes a qualified pilot and what doesn't. And that's something that we're working towards. We'll take a lot more data than we have, but we do have a lot of it now, 2 years worth.
Right. Well, you were mentioning the Hollywood uses, the film production uses of unmanned drones. And as we know, it was just a couple of months ago here when a number of production companies received some of the first exemptions from the FAA to be able to operate drones commercially. So that seems like a good transition to talk about that application. Let's look at Hollywood and drones. And we may as well, while it's on my mind, put our first MCLE passphrase into the show, and that'll be Hollywood drones. We put these into the show if you are listening for continuing legal or other educational credit on the professional side. You can find more information about that at our wiki at wiki.twit.tv. If you're a lawyer, we have some resources there for you about applying in various jurisdictions to receive CLE credit for listening to the show. And we put these passphrases in case your oversight body likes to see that you actually listen to the show. So you can show them, yes, I know both the passphrases for episode 284 of This Week in Law. We'll put another one in later on in the show. Let's look at how Hollywood is using its exemptions. Actually, I have no idea who does production for OK Go, and it looks quite possible that this particular video we're going to watch was filmed in Japan. So I'm not sure what sort of regulations, laws, or licenses or exemptions might apply, although I don't know. They could have made it look like it was filmed in Japan. But it's a really fun, the new video from OK Go is called I Won't Let You Down. And if you want to see how entertainment might use drones, we're going to start this kind of in progress because you don't really realize that this video is being filmed by a drone until right about now.
Nights out in Babylon, yeah. Nights out in Babylon. But maybe all you need is someone to trust. Maybe all you need is someone. Maybe all you need is someone to trust. Maybe all you need is someone. And I won't let you down. No, I won't let you down. I won't let you down, my love.
So things get very aerial here for a while, and they do a great job of incorporating their drone cinematographer throughout this piece, and it's very seamless and very cool. And I'm sure we will see more kinds of things like that in all sort of entertainment environments.
And Denise, I think that that's a great video. I've seen that. And I'm pretty sure, and I'd like to ask Terry this because of his expertise in particular in the Hollywood space, I'm pretty sure that that band went to Japan to film that video. For whatever reason, they couldn't get approval or didn't think they could, so they shot it outside the U.S. And again, Terry, I'd like you to respond to that if you're aware of the details of that. But that is a great sort of segue to the conversation that the drone regulation environment, is variable across the world, right? And there's a lot going on in the U.S., but there's a lot going on in Canada and the U.K. and France and Australia and other countries. And there is a migration of business opportunity, outside the U.S., which is one of the concerns that the entrepreneurs and investors have, where the regulations, I'm not sure they're looser as much as they're more mature. And enterprises using drones and really the whole economy around drones, not just the manufacturers, but the service providers and the cloud providers and the data companies. They're all sort of engaged. I mean, it's a robust network of companies that kind of come together to create the value in addition to the manufacturer. But they have, if you have to leave the country, if you have to do this outside the U.S., that has implications for business opportunities. But Terry, can you comment? Do you have any specific details on that band or why they went to Japan?
That's an interesting question, Keith. I'm not familiar with this particular video, but one thing with the insurance industry is that the FARs or the FAA regulations have nothing to do with whether we insure or whether we do not insure a particular risk. And in Europe, yes, there's a it's more widely accepted. There are regulations in place. They are being used for commercial purposes. In the U.S., there are currently 6 333 exempted film operators. We insure all 6 of those. I've always insured them. And one of the biggest issues was that some of these operators, such as Strier, David Wagreich is one of the exempted operators. He's been a cinematographer on movies like Legends of the Fall, A River Runs Through It, very well known. And the biggest concern is, hey, if I'm on a film set and I shut down an entire production because I'm operating a drone, that's, he'll never work in that town again, as they say. So what they did were this group got together with an aviation attorney that we have worked with here at Transport Risk for many, many years, named John Hill in Washington, D.C. They got together as a group and worked through the FAA to file for the exemptions, and eventually were awarded those exemptions. There's a total of 7 of them. 6 of them are in the United States. 1 is based in Belgium. So now that those exempted operators are out there, it's kind of opened up an avenue and some opportunity. But interestingly, what we saw was the California Film Commission instantly turned around, issued a notice to the film industry and said that these operators are approved. They have to meet these, there's a list of standards, basically runs down their 333 exemption, and also outlines an insurance requirement. Today in the United States, you can fly an airplane or a helicopter anywhere you want. There's no insurance requirement. In UAS, we anticipate that there is going to be an insurance requirement, and in fact, the film industry, the Film Commission has already put down that requirement. It's $2 million smooth today, as we call it. And so after all of this time of wanting to have regulation and regulated and approved film operators, it finally came through. It's true, they're available. Instantly, the first 3 film productions we saw presented to us moved across the border to Nevada so that they could use non-exempted drone operators. And so we're going to be seeing these types of adjustments to this very, very disruptive technology for a period of time while we all kind of get our arms around how to deal with it, both from an insurance, an operational, and a financing standpoint.
Yeah, there's so much to take into account there. Some background on the video. Wikipedia has a good post on it, and it was filmed in Japan. They don't say that it was done so to be clear of U.S. regulatory or other requirements. I was curious whether this was one of your insured 2,500 or several of your insured 2,500, Terry. It doesn't sound like that's the case. They were careful, it says, to film it in a vacant warehouse area. So it wasn't, something that was done in the middle of Tokyo by any means. They ultimately have over 2,300 participants in the video, however. So however vacant it was, there you did have, some safety issues that came into play. And as David has been pointing out, safety would just be one of the many law and policy issues related to this disruptive technology. And I like how I'm sort of on the fence between what Keith said earlier about this being on the continuum of things that are web enabled and net connected and moving around and collecting data in our environment, and that it could be, a disruption on the order of magnitude of the PC and the internet themselves. I think you both have good points there. So now that we've looked at the Hollywood example and talked about some of the concerns that are specific to that industry, let's zoom our drone out a bit and take the 10,000 foot or higher view and look at some of those law and policy considerations. All right, David, tell us about the model law that you authored or worked on, and what the purpose of that was, and whether anything has become of it. Has it been adopted or used in an advisory capacity in Washington?
Thanks, Denise. The model law was brought forward by a civil rights group, working group, that I was invited to join. And I was the only business lawyer or private property, privacy lawyer there looking at it from a business standpoint and interested in regulation. Most of the other members of the working group were interested in banning drones, and I felt that the cat was already out of the bag, so to speak, and that I was not interested in putting effort in that direction. So we ended up putting out two integrated models, one based on a banning notion and one based on a regulating notion. And, has it been taken up? No, not really. There were some local activist groups that tried to use parts of it, but with so much of the regulation up in the air because of the FAA first issuing some sort of pronouncements, going back on some of them, and then some of the litigation happening, and the rules forthcoming. There's been a sense that it may have been a little premature for state and local bodies to be taking up drone legislation. My personal feeling is that with the FAA expressly denying jurisdiction generally under 400 feet, and at the same time maintaining some jurisdiction over any flying thing because it's a, quote, aircraft, we just have a confusing situation. And at the same time, there are localities purchasing drones. Law enforcement is purchasing drones. They have drones. They're using drones. And drones in combination with things like Google Earth really call into question people's privacy rights in a way that they never have before. The model legislation that the parts that I inputted had to do with getting personal responsibility associated with the use of drones. In my view, if someone wanted to fly a drone not on their own property, outside their own property, then they should file locally. They should show that they have, my suggestion was $100,000 bond, which is very common in commercial activities, to post some form of bond to cover the public in case of an unexpected injury. Similarly, when law enforcement uses drones, I wanted some individual to have to sign an attestation that the drone would be flown safely away from crowded areas and the like. These were ideas that percolated to the top in working group discussions, and it just was the beginning of a discussion. I don't know if any of those concepts will make their way into actual legislation, but at the same time, just talking about them in a professional way, putting them down in writing and putting it on the internet gave people a chance to use that as a model, take some language if they thought it was appropriate or not. And so it was a very initial stab at things. There were about 15 of us who worked on it. It was published, and there was a commentary with hundreds and hundreds of footnotes so that other interested people could take advantage of the work. And since it was an entirely pro bono initiative, we feel like we got our money's worth from that standpoint.
That's funny. And I also loved that the regulations are up in the air, because of course they are in this area. It's called the Bill of Rights Defense Committee, the group that David was working with. So that is out there, and it's certainly something lawmakers in states and in Washington can refer to as they're grappling with these issues. Apparently the FAA, which has been sort of back and forth, oh, we'll have something for you by 2015. Now they're saying they're going to release a small drone rule by the end of the year. Terry, do you have any insight on that?
Only what the FAA has released, and there's been a lot of pushback, even from members of the Senate. New Zealand recently released what their proposed notice of proposed rulemaking is, and That's one that just came out in the last couple of days, and we think that one's going to be closely related. So we're looking closely at that. But the FAA has already hinted to the fact that they're going to require a pilot's license under 400 feet, distances from airports, similar to what most people assume is proper operation right now, or within the guidelines of the AMA, Class G airspace. But time will tell. We'll see how restrictive it is, how reasonable it is, and if it's something that's going to stifle an industry or help grow an industry.
Yeah.
Right. So go ahead, Keith.
But yeah, Denise, one of the nuances of the regulations that I think people are waiting to see is whether or not the FAA requires a line of sight to the drone. And this is very important because if a pilot if there's one pilot per drone and you need line of sight to that machine, that fundamentally lowers the order of magnitude of impact, because what it prevents essentially is the concept of a drone fleet. Now, I know when I say drone fleet, it elicits images of drone armies and all sorts of negative things, and wow, well, who wants drone fleets anyway? But actually, what we do want is we want to scale the adoption and use of these disruptive technologies to create value. And it's hard to do that if you need one pilot per drone. And so some of the more interesting companies that have come out in the last year or two have been funded by very big VC firms in Silicon Valley, which, as it turns out, has been sort of ground zero for a lot of innovation in this space, in California, that is. Some of these companies are focusing specifically on building the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, to manage fleets of drones that enable you to sit here, in a command center or some kind of drone operating center, some kind of central area where you might have drones situated, say, up along an oil pipeline or perhaps out on various oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, whatever the industrial application is, and able to manage and operate those remotely, number one, and through the cloud, say 4G equipped drones, for example, as well as to have more than one being one pilot or one operator managing more than one at a time, which enables that scale. So that is only one of a number of the line items that'll be coming out in the regulations, but that line of sight requirement does restrict the ability to survey larger pieces of land, in agriculture, for example. If you have to physically see that drone, then it can only go so far, right? So there are some very big, there's the black and white sort of binary implications. Can you do this? Can you actually fly them? And then, which is a real positive development, right? I mean, the good news is that any regulations that come out start to provide certainty and clarity around what is the art of the possible, and we don't have that now. So it's fundamentally all banned, right? So that's good. But that line of sight requirement, or that one pilot, one drone requirement, that's going to directly impact how quickly the industry can scale or all sorts of industrial uses. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, maybe that might be an area where the consideration David mentioned a minute ago, whether you're on your own property or not, would come into play. Of course, pipelines and things go over lots of property, and the pipeline operator doesn't necessarily own it. So I don't know if that would solve the problem. But it does seem like you could, at minimum, perhaps, David, say that things like line of sight or one operator, one drone might have less of a concern if somebody is operating on their own vast ranch or wherever else you might have a bunch of land and want to be flying drones. Do you think that could be the case?
What's the concern with someone who's a rancher or a farmer flying their drone, or many of them, on their own property? To me, it's completely ridiculous that the federal government would assert that kind of jurisdiction on someone's own private property. Now, if it comes a time where a farmer or a rancher is flying a drone on their own property under 400 feet, and it's responsible, in my view, and the federal government gives them a hard time, I'd be interested to take their case on a pro bono basis, because it's not right. It's not fair. And we would have a lot of support in that case. So I'll put the offer out there. As far as I'm concerned, if people are flying their own drones on their own private property in a rural area, then that's their right to do so. And nothing about drones should ever change that. Now, when you're dealing with urban areas and it's difficult to control a drone possibly from smashing into a next door apartment building, well, I could not sign off on that as being responsible use. Even if you own your condo, it doesn't mean you can necessarily fly your drone in it. But as we can see, just in the hypotheticals, we're talking about incredibly varied and diverse situations, and they need to be examined more or less on a case-by-case basis. The kinds of things Keith was talking about, where you might have a controller who's operating drones and they're doing those dirty and dangerous jobs like checking high-voltage power lines in Wyoming and Montana. Why hire one person to look at one drone when you could have one person managing several of them doing a simple task like flying along high voltage power lines to find a problem? So I really feel it needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. I think there needs to be a hypersensitivity to the private property rights of people so that they're not restricted. The notion that someone needs a pilot license to fly a drone over their own crops is just ludicrous, and I can't wait for that to come out as a legal ruling.
Right. We'll have to see what does happen there. Terry, we keep talking about this 400-foot requirement limit without really explaining what that is or why that number is important to the FAA. Can you do that for us? Do we have Terry? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Essentially, it's Class G airspace. It involves separation of manned aircraft from unmanned aircraft. So, if manned aircraft are flying down to 500 feet, if we put a maximum of 400 feet in Class G, which is uncontrolled airspace, that it assures a separation. If we go above that, they could be mixing it up, and that's a safety issue.
Right. So as things stand today, obviously we still have a commercial drone ban in place with certain exemptions that we discussed earlier that are slowly being issued, and the FAA promising or telegraphing that it's going to have something out for small drones by the end of the year. So you're thinking, Terry, that what that will entail is that they must operate in that Class G airspace. Anything else you can tell us about what may come our way before the end of the year?
That's definitely one requirement, and it's something that's reasonable, and I think that most operators abide by that. Most responsible operators. Some of the real issues that we see with it are the requirement of a pilot's license, a requirement of or the elimination or requiring line of sight at all times. That's an issue, and on the other hand, another thing is that they're lumping small UAS in under 55 and under pounds. That's a big range when it comes to small UAS. And a 55-pound drone is a big drone today as compared to what you see behind me over here. And so lumping all of those requirements and all uses into a single category with very, almost onerous requirements is going to be an issue, and there's a lot of pushback coming. Today, I would correct one thing: there is no rule. The FAA contends there's a rule against commercial use, but in reality, there's no rules, and that's what's creating the confusion and the problems today. From our standpoint, we will insure all comers depending upon the risk. Whether we insure first-person view, FPV as it's known, is determined by how the losses, what kind of losses we're seeing. Autonomous or semi-autonomous systems for agriculture, if they're crashing all over the place, then that's going to be a problem. I mean, they may still be operating legally under the FARs, but they wouldn't be insurable. Likewise, insurability and regulations are two completely different issues. So today, we're watching everything very, very closely. We're taking an opportunity to see where the losses are falling, seeing where the flight controllers, what the pilot experience, what uses maybe we should be involved with and not be involved with. And by aviation insurance standards, it's a pretty cheap education. If we can go out and we're paying for $15,000 or $20,000 drones, as opposed to $50 or $60 million airplanes, that's a benefit. So we could take advantage of this period of time in the small UAS to learn, where the lines of safety are, and at the end of the day, in insurance is profitability, and it just so happens that it's correlated with safety. So it's an important laboratory, and we're hoping that the data we're collecting today will be useful both with the FAA and private sector to go out and say, this is reality. This is what we've seen, regardless of what everybody's saying. These are the facts. This is empirical evidence, and this is what we're willing to insure, and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
So Terry, say I'm a customer. I have a company and I want to use drones commercially, and let's make it an easy case where I'm not going to be flying over somebody else's property. Although I'm sure you have clients that you insure who do that, right?
Absolutely. We insure every use you can imagine. And similar to manned helicopters, coverage is predicated upon use. Because a helicopter is covered for Part 135, which is commercial charter, carrying passengers for hire, doesn't mean that they're going to be insured for long line or hauling logs out of a forest.
Right.
So they have named uses under the policy. We do the same thing. We have three primary criteria: aircraft type, pilot experience, and use. If those three criteria all make sense, it's something that we'll probably insure. If it's commercial use, it's not a problem. Going over somebody else's property it's really not something that is excluded under an insurance policy. So the insurance industry is separate from privacy laws. We're separate from FAR regulations. We're basing it upon does it make sense from an insurance standpoint.
Right.
And the good thing about this from an underwriting standpoint is drone operators are pretty proud of their work. So airplane operators, we can't find a lot about what they're doing. Drone operators, they literally within 20 minutes of getting back to their computer, it's on YouTube or it's up on their Vimeo site. And one of our underwriters just came back today and said, this person says he doesn't fly over populated areas. Meanwhile, we find all these YouTube videos of him at, a Poison concert flying over heads. And so it's a very disruptive, very accessible technology. And it's something that, that we find very interesting. And so we'll insure it until the losses become unreasonable and it doesn't make financial sense.
Right. Drone operators are exhibitionists. The stories are legions of people who are collecting healthcare benefits and then post pictures of themselves running marathons or what have you, despite their supposedly debilitating workplace injury and getting in trouble for that. So I guess the drone operators have their own hazards along those lines vis-a-vis insurance. So let me ask you, I'm interested in some coverage issues, because obviously there are different kinds of risks if you're going to operate a drone. Let's look at the privacy. We're going to talk about privacy in detail in a moment here, but just from the insurance standpoint, if you got sued for somebody's privacy violation, is that something that you will insure against, Terry?
It depends on what the situation is. That's a really difficult issue for us in insurance. We have two different types of coverage under an aviation insurance policy. One is bodily injury, which is what we define as blood, guts, gore, and fire. And then you have personal injury, which is claimed injury that doesn't involve blood, guts, gore, and fire. So you hurt my feelings, libel, slander, false arrest, things like that, potential privacy violations. The biggest problem that we have, we're very careful when we insure a risk to look at what they're doing, is because we're state regulated, we're not federally regulated. occurrence. We have 50 different states with 50 different sets of statutes that we have to somehow follow. And then we've got, within those 50 states, we have municipalities as small as right here in Colorado, Deer Trail, who wanted to open up a hunting season on drones. So suddenly we find ourselves in an impossible position of potentially having to ensure a privacy violation without knowing it, because we have so many different laws. So we do insure for it. But it's on a very selective and an individual basis. For example, the energy industry, the pipeline power line industries, the film industry, we're careful about that, real estate, obviously. So we just look at every risk separately. So the law, that's a long way of saying it depends upon the situation and how the policy is written. If we include the coverage, it'll be a covered loss. If we feel that there's too much exposure, we just won't provide the coverage within the policy.
All right, to tee up this next discussion, I'll go ahead and put our second MCLE passphrase in the show, and it's going to be, how do I say this in a pithy way? Guy shot my drone. And that'll be our second phrase for the show. And what I'm referring to is we've been talking a lot about the requirements on drone operators in a commercial setting. And we haven't been talking so much about the requirements of the rest of us when it comes to other people operating drones in our space. But there have been tons of stories about people who've been upset about a drone either looking into their property from outside of it or doing a flyover and deciding to take justice into their own hands and shoot it down. I think, David, you sent me a good Reddit link of a recent one submitted 4 days ago. The headline on Reddit is, "Neighbors shot down my Hex with a shotgun. Hex was over my property when downed. What are my options?" This is in California. So certainly, as Terry was just mentioning, municipalities opening a hunting season on drones. That's a new one on me. So David, what from the legal standpoint, what do you think about the rules when it comes to drones for the rest of us?
Well, from a legal standpoint, there's no law that says you can just whip out your shotgun anytime you're pissed and start firing it off, notwithstanding what Joe Biden said during the whole gun control comments. The fact of the matter is that there's a lot of rules on when you can discharge a firearm, whether you can do it publicly at all, depends on whether you live in a rural place or not. In most places, it can often be a crime to discharge a firearm in public unless you're in immediate jeopardy of your life. So these are serious issues. If your neighbor flies a drone over and you grab your shotgun as a matter of first recourse, there's a very good chance you yourself will be finding yourself charged with a crime. Now, as for how drones affect the rest of us, for me, it comes back to the golden rule and being a good neighbor. You're not allowed to peep in your neighbor's windows with binoculars, and so you're not allowed to fly a peeping drone over to your neighbors. This should be self-explanatory. However, with the advent of drones that people can play with, or ones that are easy to fly around, there's a temptation to see what your neighbor's doing. There's a temptation to fly down the block and see what's going on. And in that moment of temptation, many people will forget to respect their neighbor's privacy rights. And so I think it really requires that pilot, amateur, hobbyist, or commercial pilot, to look at what they're doing and whose rights might be affected and act accordingly. And that goes to education and training and a whole host of issues. Yeah,
and Denise, if I can layer on sort of a commercial, context for that. There's always the peeping Tom drone. I'm not sure I want to speak to that directly, but that also speaks to intent. And outside of intent, in a corporate context, a lot of things happen without intent, and that doesn't necessarily excuse risk. So, for example, there was a story recently in Australia about which has a very robust drone economy, and there was a story about a real estate company that was using a drone to survey a certain neighborhood and was flying over the neighborhood to capture a 3D image of them, and they just incidentally flew over someone's backyard where a grandma, that's what the headline said anyway, was sunbathing naked. And, the machine captured the image, and the operator, I don't think, had a first-person viewer, so they were just flying the object sort of in a path, a preordained navigational path, and did not realize that they captured this woman, undressed in her backyard until they had already published the picture. And so it went, and of course she's now suing them and so forth for violating her privacy. So here's an example of a really good use of a drone, and without intent violating someone's privacy. And we have other situations. I was actually working with a company recently who owns oil rigs and maintains them, and they wanted to use drones as part of their infrastructure solution for monitoring the quality of the infrastructure and that kind of thing. And one of the real concerns, was basically the privacy of the employees. Like, this is a great idea. This is a low cost. It's certainly a lot less expensive. And Terry was referring to this earlier. Instead of sending a manned helicopter, sending a $2,000 drone or having it already there on a charging station is a much more practical solution. But you've got teams and crews working on those oil rigs that don't necessarily want to be filmed all the time or want to know that they're on film. And so there's again inadvertent violations or risks to privacy in the workplace, even with a good use case, with good insurance, and with good control. So I think there's just sort of those two sides of that equation.
And you've just made me think about the whole employment law ramifications if drones are going to be used by companies. That the labor lawyers and employment lawyers that work in these places are going to have to take these things into account, and possibly we'll start to see employment agreements and the various understandings between employers and employees reflect that the kind of consideration that you just brought up, Keith, that someone's going to need to sign off on. Yeah, you can fly the drone over while I'm working on the rig. Keith, I'm going to drive you crazy right now because you were mentioning to me and lamenting the fact that here in California we record this show over lunchtime, and I'm about to talk about some delicious food because we're going to take a break here and thank our first sponsor for this episode of This Week in Law, which is Blue Apron. I've been using this service. It is so awesome, you guys. You really, really need to check it out. Cooking and eating, of course, should be fun. It should be convenient. It should be easy, and it should be delicious. And Blue Apron hits it out of the ballpark on all those fronts. It's also health conscious, just to make it even better for you. Or if you want to be able to accomplish all those goals, but you just don't know your way around a kitchen, and I'm pretty close to that. Cooking can definitely be daunting and a chore. And ordering out, of course, is expensive. You can't eat out all the time. Who knows how long that the food in the grocery store or the restaurant has been sitting there. You're not necessarily in control of how your food has been sourced in those circumstances. But you can forget all of that because Blue Apron is going to make your cooking fresh and delicious and easy. And I tell you guys, I've been using this stuff. It's really, really wonderful. Here's how it works. You pay just $9.99 per person per meal. And then Blue Apron sends you a refrigerated box with the right high quality ingredients. And I've made a few of these meals now, and I can tell you I have yet to find a wilted herb or piece of lettuce or any other, everything in there is something that I would have picked out at the grocery store if I liked to spend a lot of time in grocery stores, which I do not. It also sends it to you in exactly the right proportions and gives you simple step-by-step recipe instructions. And all this comes right to your house in these wonderful little refrigerated cooler boxes. The ingredients all come from local farms, so you'll be getting produce that is currently in season and at its peak of freshness. And the meals, too, are only about 500 to 700 calories a serving, but you'd never be able to know that from how great they taste. Blue Apron will work around your schedule and your dietary preferences. Cooking each meal takes about half an hour. shipping is always free, and the menu always features new recipes. So you're not getting into a rut where, oh, gee, do I have to get the chicken marsala again? We really liked that, but I've had it 3 times now. They're constantly rotating, and they'll never send you the same meal twice unless you go ahead and ask for that. You'll make meals like salmon with quick preserved lemon, quinoa, and curly kale, or cabbage and charred stirred fried rice with sweet potatoes and shiitake mushrooms. Recently, we made, let's see exactly what it was called here. It was chicken with, it has some seasonings in it that I'm not terribly familiar with. So let me see if I can find the right meal. Oh, there it is. Yuzu koshu, glazed chicken drumsticks. And we actually have some photos of that if you'd like to see what it looks like in your own home. This is what, after the preparation and it was already getting plated up. Let's see what else we can show you from actual fun with food. This is at the beginning when you're laying out the ingredients, and you see you get all the right portions. Let's see what else we can look at. This is preparing the shiitake mushrooms and turnips that were involved in this dish. And there's the chicken cooking up in that great yuzu koshu sauce, which was just savory and delicious. And then here we are on the plate, all getting ready to eat. And in fact, this particular meal I gave to my neighbor across the street so she could cook it and I could enjoy it with her. And that brings up the fact that during the holidays, you really want to be thinking about Blue Apron on your shopping list too. They make incredible gifts. If you know someone who, like me, loves to have all the convenience and deliciousness that Blue Apron can offer. You'll cook incredible meals and be blown away by the quality and freshness. It's fast, fresh, and super affordable. And best of all, you're going to cook like a gourmet chef. It really makes you look good. So you can see what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's right, 2 meals free just for going to blueapron.com/twit. Thank you so much, Blue Apron, for your support of This Week in Law. I'll give you one final Blue Apron tip on that holiday gifting front. After you've gotten your own 2 meals free and you're ready to give out gifts, if you use your MasterCard, you'll get a $25 credit on your own account. So it's just win-win all around. Thank you so much, Blue Apron. We love your food. Sorry, Keith. You starving now?
I was about to run to the kitchen, but
yeah, I know you've got to. Let's talk about, we've been talking about how, as though it were so easy to tell when we've got commercial use going on and private recreational use going on of unmanned aircraft. But Terry, I would think that the line between those two things is fairly blurry, wouldn't you?
It's. I think the FAA is applying with the same thing they do to manned aviation. Are you operating the aircraft in exchange for compensation? And if you are, they're viewing it as commercial. Mm-hmm. But there's no rule. I mean, again, it comes back to, they're just, it is very vague. It's not clear by any stretch. And so our policies, from an insurance standpoint only, if it's commercial use, we insure aerial filming for hire and everything below that, which would be non-commercial use and pleasure and business. So it's, if the FAA does violate or attempts to violate for a commercial use violation, we would still cover the loss. So it doesn't really impact us, but it is a vague, very blurry line.
Yeah, David, what do you think from a lawmaking standpoint lawmakers should do about that? I can certainly think of situations where someone might be out privately flying their non-commercial drone with a camera on it and capture something newsworthy that winds up being valuable to news networks, and they're able to sell the footage, say. So that has all of a sudden become a commercial use. Can you think of other situations where the line would be blurred, and how do you think lawmakers would handle it?
Well, I think there's a lot of situations where the line is blurred. You have photographers, you have realtors now, where it's become very common to include in a sales video a drone eye view, so to speak, of the property. The realtor or the realtor's assistant was not compensated properly specifically for doing that drone flight and taking the photography and the video, but at the same time it's part of a professional venture. And what we have in the context, as Terry mentioned, no rule, we have a situation where people are possibly turned into federal criminals, or at a very minimum subject to federal fines for doing something that they either did not know was against the law or did not think was against the law because they were engaged in a hobby or for their own interest or recreation. And there's the only case we have right now was primarily this very issue where somebody had to face, I think, a $10,000 FAA fine for flying his hobby drone, so to speak. And a lawyer in New York who's been making quite a name for himself. I've never met him, but I've seen his writing. Brendan Schulman, I believe his name is. He's on Twitter at Drone Laws. The guy has been fighting tooth and nail the FAA in the administrative process and through the appeals. And the FAA just ruled against his client. The lower decision ruled in favor of the drone operator, and the FAA appeal board ruled against. Well, whether he's taking this pro bono or not, for the average person, getting slapped with a $10,000 FAA fine is it can be a life-altering experience, and it's just not fair to anybody to have at the same time consumer purchasing of small, mid-size, even up to 55-pound or greater drones. The fact that, as has been noted in the IR chat room on the side, these are not different than remote-controlled aircraft, which have been used for many years without incident, as I understand. And so people are facing a situation where the government, the FAA, is not being clear with what the rules are, except to say that you can be punished. And you need to hire the lawyer to get yourself out from that punishment. It's just a terribly unfair, and I would suggest unconstitutional framework to be operating in. Blurry lines, no clear rules, but a system of civil money penalties and possibly criminal penalties. And of course, the whole weight of a federal government and its administration and bureaucracy going against an individual, it's a David and Goliath situation.
So, Terry, bearing that in mind, do you think that people's homeowners policies or some sort of separate policy might be necessary if you're, going to give your kid the SEMA under the Christmas tree and hope to avoid the $10,000 associated FAA fine? Do you think that people need to be thinking about the risk involved in personal use?
If as it stands right now, homeowners and most other CGL or commercial general liability policies exclude aviation uses. If you don't have it included, it's going to be excluded. The only way to know the answer to that is to go out and have the loss. If the FAA determines that it's a aviation exposure, I could. This isn't. I don't know every policy, but I would assume that your insurer is going to deny coverage. So and that's why even Fortune 500 companies that operate aircraft have to insure those aircraft under a specific aviation policy. That's what we do here.
Keith, any thoughts about the strange line between private and commercial use of drones before we move on to some privacy considerations?
Well, I just think that both David and Terry have been talking about the ambiguity and the lack of certainty in these things. And it does open up both individuals and companies to great risk. And of course, the individual that David was referring to that's fighting the defendant who's trying to avoid that $10,000 fine has limited resources to shape and influence policy. But there are many very big brand name companies, and I probably shouldn't list them out, but they're companies that we all know, very big technology companies, social network companies, companies that are members of the Fortune 100, not just Fortune 500, that are actively lobbying and investing in the ability to shape that policy, and frankly are expecting and anticipating that those rules will change in a way that'll support, not change in terms of go away, but in a way that will support a very clear set of guidelines. So I think while individuals can't probably defend themselves well, and that is a very real statement that David said, that a $10,000 fine could be a life-changing event, I think there are plenty of Fortune 50 and 100 companies that are investing heavily in anticipation of clarity coming, maybe not in this December, but within the next, say, 1 to 2 years, in a way that will meaningfully help even individuals. They'll provide an environment in which even individuals can probably understand what their risks are and aren't.
All right. In a moment here, we're going to talk about surveillance and stalking and intrusions and other privacy considerations. But before we do that, we're going to talk about something that you do in the privacy of your own home, and that is shaving. We're going to thank our second sponsor for this episode of This Week in Law, and that's Harry's. You no doubt have someone on your shopping list that is impossible to shop for. I know I do. I have several dozen of them. The guy or gal in your life who has everything. We're recording the show on December 5th here, and I am in full holiday, got to line up, get everything in place because most of our family and friends that we exchange gifts with live far away. So you have to build in that they need to have their products shipped to them too. If you are going to try and buy them a thoughtful gift, you've got to think about Harry's. Harry's is here to help you in this time of need. Just in time for the holidays, Harry's has a limited edition winter Winston set. It's just $30. I want to, we're showing it to you on the screen. I actually have one right here. I can show you live and in person. This is the ice blue model of the razor. They're just beautiful. I've been shaving with Harry's, so has my husband. Of course, my shaving is somewhat different than my husband's. And I tell you, both of us love this product. Harry's, it has a great look and feel. Just the set itself, all the little components, it comes boxed nicely. Each individual thing, the blades come in their own box. Just a really nice presentation when it comes to a gift. The price is incredible. It's half as much as the razors that you find at the store, those Gillette Fusion and other kinds of razors. And the blades, there's just no touching them. They're excellent quality blades, and they're just a fraction of the cost of what you'd pay in a store. They have all kinds of additional products too. They have a new aftershave moisturizer that protects and hydrates the skin. And Harry's absolutely guarantees that you'll be satisfied. Its razors are high quality and about half the price of those big brand blades. They make their razors in their own factory in Germany, and they engineer them for sharpness and high performance. There are no more dull blades when you're a Harry's shaver. And that's because they make and ship their own blades. It's a more efficient company that way, which means they can give us factory direct pricing. And as a special holiday offer, Harry is gifting all of our fans $5 off that limited edition winter Winston set. That's right. Even those of you who, like me, are already loyal Harry's users, you'll still get $5 off that winter Winston set. You'll get the razor, 3 quality blades, a tube of their foaming shave gel or shave cream, and free shipping just for $25. How could you beat that as a gift? Free shipping ends on December 10th, though, so you're going to want to get on this. Go to harrys.com and get $5 off the limited edition Winter Winston set with the code TWILHOLIDAY. All new and existing customers get $5 off their purchase with that code TWILHOLIDAY. That's Harrys, HARRYS.com, and enter TWILHOLIDAY at checkout. Harry's, a shave good enough to gift. And thank you so much, Harry's, for your support of This Week in Law. All right, let's go stalk some people with drones. Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
Oh, I was just going to say, Denise, I don't know what the protocol is, but that would make a very nice gift for panelists, I think.
Oh, it would make an awesome gift for panelists. Absolutely, especially those I see frequently, such as Mr. Strier here.
Just saying. All right.
Absolutely. Let's go stalking. All right, well, you might want to have a drone following you around like the drone in Destiny that Keith writes about in a great LinkedIn piece on drones and their considerations. Or you might not want one following you around. But over at CNN, there's a headline, "Is this the world's first stalker drone?" This gadget is from the UK. It is actually, it's from Shanghai, it looks like. Shanghai-based startup AirMind. And they are crowdfunding themselves via Kickstarter. And it has an ability to film and follow a designated person or target. So as if the one, that your neighbor has with the telephoto high definition lens weren't bad enough, now we can actually have our targets followed around with intent. So all of this simply underscores the need for privacy considerations as lawmakers not only think about how these things are going to fly around safely, but what everybody else's rights are, in addition to not being injured by the quadcopter buzzing their front lawn. So, David, this is really your pet topic here. Why don't you tell us the status, if any, of privacy regulations for drones?
Well, the status is that we still have the same privacy rights that we had before drones showed up. And in technology, I'm sure you're familiar, there's this word called porting, right? When we take one software and we port it, say, to a different platform, getting a certain kind of software to work on both the PC platform and the Macintosh platform or the Linux platform, et cetera. And I like to use this term porting when we talk about our privacy rights. We have very well established and understood privacy rights. They've been part of the development of our legal system for the whole time that we've been a country. The Constitution, many states have written right in, such as California, a right to privacy. In the federal Constitution, of course, we are taught the seminal case of Griswold versus Connecticut, where the Supreme Court found our rights of privacy and the, quote, penumbras and emanations coming out of the 4th, 5th, 9th, 10th Amendments, or 8th Amendment. So we have privacy rights. What we haven't done is think through how to keep the benefits of these privacy rights in this age of this new technology. And again, from my perspective, it's a major disrupting technology that affects every facet of human life. And so to me, it's no surprise that stalking drones, which could be looked at as a person, if they are themselves the target, then it would be more of a personal biography drone. But if you call it a stalking drone, it begs the question, who are you stalking and why? That's obviously not acceptable conduct. We have ingrained privacy rights that include the right to not be spied on, the right to enjoy it's so hard to describe it using the words, because usually we describe it in terms of what is an invasion of our privacy. Clearly, what we do in our homes, the average person considers to be private. Usually that extends to our backyards. Often that extends to our daily route. No one expects that they will be tracked on their walkways, their driving pathways, their patterns of activity. And we know that with big data and data mining, companies that may not have any bad intent, but that they can mine this data and get to know more about us than we know about ourselves. And these are all impacts of privacy, impacts on our privacy. So the state of the law is that we have the same privacy rights we had before, but just like any right, it's like a muscle. And if you don't use that muscle, it will atrophy. And the same goes with your privacy rights. If you don't assert your privacy rights, then you will lose them after they become weakened. So it's incumbent on everyone to push back against intrusion of their privacy by everyone, as far as I'm concerned, neighbors, the government, anyone. It's just your own personal responsibility. Lawyers are there to help with that. State government officials, even federal government officials, can react to invasions of privacy. And so, I really feel encouraged because people are focused on their privacy and they're not letting it slip away. But we have to balance those things against the countervailing interests that people have, also within their free rights to buy these drones, use them for as many different purposes as one can imagine. And none of the rules that relate to privacy have changed. The ability to violate those rules has changed, become much more easy and inexpensive, but the basic rules have not changed concerning privacy.
Right. This is why I love our IRC chat room. Ned J10 in there mentioned there might be something about this drone that we should pay attention to. And I haven't looked up the Kickstarter page and read all its stat. I'm going from CNN's coverage here, but he says the drone in question, this quote-unquote stalker drone, is a follow-me type remote camera. And its intended use is for action camera type settings, and it requires the target to carry a transmitter. But here over on CNN, it's saying that what the drone operator needs to do for this stalker one is to open an app. It's an Android app. Choose the target. It's not saying how the target is chosen, so I don't see where the transmitter comes in. To follow via the camera on their phone and hit start. And then the processor tracks the selected item for up to 20 meters, 65 feet above, and at a maximum distance of up to 50 meters, 164 feet behind, using its autopilot feature. And it can also respond to hand signals. Waving a right hand will instruct the device to come closer. Raising both hands will make it take a picture, while pointing to the ground tells it to land. So it sounds like a pretty cool device, but also laden with privacy violating capabilities, as David was discussing. Here in California, David, we have a technology privacy bill that was signed recently. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it was an outgrowth of a year of attempted legislation for drones. There was a bill, a pretty wide-ranging bill that was debated in the California state legislature for a while. It didn't go anywhere. It had been opposed by both law enforcement and also private interests. And that started the legislators thinking, and then what did come out was some protection, mostly for celebrities. And California does, because of Hollywood, have some very specific rules that protect celebrities, and that drone law that Governor Brown signed was a very narrowly tailored law to reiterate that the privacy rights or commercial privacy rights of celebrities are protected in California.
All right. Keith, we talked before about how this the privacy ramifications of this might impact businesses, one way being that employees might have to agree to waive some of their privacy rights when drones are involved. But what about considerations for people who are not your own employees? It seems like that would be the greater risk, don't you think?
Yeah, again, I think I think there's just a litany of risks. Capturing data on someone who works for you without them knowing. Hey, look, there are cameras in most workplaces, right? I mean, you know, you walk into retail locations, you're on camera. I don't think you could cross the street in London without being on 3 or 4 different cameras. So I think we've given up this notion of not being on camera. I'm not sure one that's flying 65 feet up makes it particularly riskier to you or more violative of your rights. I don't know. I mean, I can't venture to say, but there really are a number of risks for enterprises that go beyond just violating privacy. So, for example, you capture information, and these are data capture devices, and the amount of data is phenomenal. I mean, you know, these are one of the newer consumer drones coming out. So this is a consumer drone. This is not an industrial one. This is a consumer drone that weighs probably 2 pounds or less, coming out this Christmas, has a 14 megapixel camera in it. So if it's streaming 14 megapixel video, you know, back to something, I mean, this is gigabytes and gigabytes of data, right? So it's capturing a lot of data. Where does that data go, right? Do you have to store that data? For how long do you have to store that data? You know, is that data discoverable? And recently, I saw this fascinating article that Fitbit, you know, the wearable fitness computer, it was for the first time, Fitbit was subpoenaed. The data on someone's Fitbit was subpoenaed as part of a lawsuit, and this was, I think, I may or may not be the first time, but the article said it was the first time a wearable computer was actually subpoenaed in a litigation. And so there is a question about data retention. What do you do with the data if you find that you have snapped a picture of a citizen half naked in their backyard? Do you have an obligation to delete it or report it to them? So again, you know, I think there's just a litany of risks that enterprises have to cope with, and the rules are what they are. Like David said, before drones came around, these issues are true too. But companies are going to have to develop policies or update their policies and update their PR policies and how they deal with the potential crisis that comes out of this. Because I think that's one other important thing we haven't talked about, which is there's breaking the law. There's a compliance issue. You know, are you in compliance with a regulation? Do you have insurance? You know, so there's all those boxes to check. And then there's, even if you do that all right, then there's just the perception, right? There's the optics. And there was right here in Southern California, there was a lot of articles recently on how the police department in LA had received as a gift a drone that another police department had purchased but decided not to use. All they did was take ownership of it, and it caused such a huge outcry. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't violate any rules. I'm not sure they ever turned it on. But just the sheer taking possession of a drone resulted in protests and articles and all sorts of reactions. And I think that speaks to the PR and the optics. And if you're a large, well-known, publicly traded company, you're going to be concerned, or at least be prepared to manage that as well as any other legitimate risk.
Terry, recently the FAA declined to get involved on the privacy side. There was a petition to the FAA to start a public rulemaking to address privacy and civil liberties issues concerning domestic drones, but the agency said it's not required to solicit public comments on the privacy implications because privacy is not an immediate safety concern. So that would seem to make perfect sense. The FAA is saying, you know, not our job, not our department. I'm not surprised by that. But if it's not the FAA's department, Terry, then whose is it?
The FAA is a safety organization. Privacy is something that every response I've seen from the ACLU associated with UAS, unmanned aircraft, is that their position, and I think most people's are, as David pointed out, is that we have adequate laws. We have privacy laws in place. I can't go to my neighbor's house, throw up a ladder, climb up there, and look in their bedroom window. Same thing with the drone. Privacy is not a pressing safety issue. It's not something that the FAA should be involved with. God, I can't even imagine if we had the FAA involved with it. So we feel the same way. I mean, that they're adequately the privacy issues are adequately addressed by current laws. A lot of it has to do with intent. Same thing with our insurance policies as it relates to privacy laws. So this notion that people are not already being photographed every single day by a news helicopter flying over, if you're sitting in a traffic back up in LA while a news helicopter is filming an accident, they're filming you. They're filming over your houses. The police are filming. They've got FLIR. They have cameras. That make something like this look like a toy, which by and large are. And so the same thing is same thing as far as privacy goes. That our contention with the FAA, and I've had this argument with several people there, is that people are already dying. They as from a safety standpoint, people are in pipeline, power line patrol, things like that. It's not as though we don't have, those things occurring already. So the FAA needs to focus on some common sense rulemaking, listen to the industry, and, stay out of privacy. There, my soapbox.
All right. Well, I think that's a good invitation, as long as we're on these privacy considerations, to sort of expand this out past the unmanned aerial vehicles we've been focusing on for the show, and into what Keith was talking about early on, the fact that there are all kinds of drones and not all of them fly, and also the fact that just about everything in our lives is going to become a data collection device if it's not already there now. So Keith, I wanted you to kind of expand on that a bit more and give us your thoughts about the Internet of Things in the context of what we've been discussing today, and where you think it's going, and what sort of both business and consumer concerns we should be aware of.
Sure. Well, first, I want to dispel this myth of disagreeability between David and I. I know it makes good drama for TV to have disagreement. And this is Orange County, and we like drama. But actually, I think David and I were making two somewhat compatible points, but speaking to two different issues. Drones or unmanned aerial vehicles, or whatever you want to call them, they are definitely on the continuum of innovation. But that's not to say, and they're just devices that connect to something much larger and serve a purpose, right? But that's not to say they're not disruptive. So they're not mutually exclusive comments. And I don't want to challenge David's point, because I'm a big fan of disruption when it happens, and we often don't know what's happening until it already happens. I think that the ability to move things beyond your personal space, to fly an object, to capture an image, to all these different functions that UAVs serve, that is very disruptive. That does enable us to do things. And I think about one of my son's friends, a 12-year-old boy who's very creative, and received a high definition camera some years ago for Christmas, and was able to turn his love of creating little Nerf movies into a YouTube channel that now generates $2,000 a month for this kid, who clearly will be able to put himself through college just by posting silly little movies of Nerf wars, in his backyard. And that's pretty disruptive, in a sense, right? I mean, it essentially turned into an entrepreneur. So I think the economics and the innovation around these vehicles and the ability to capture and transmit data in the way that they do will be very disruptive to many industries. So I don't actually think there's any disagreement at all. But to go further, the Internet of Things, is just a construct. It's just the nature of where we're going. It's about making, essentially connecting up all these everyday objects, and the inspiration that creates in new industries, new business models, new customer experiences, and along with them, a set of concomitant risks and liabilities to be dealt with. But by and large, there are technical or operational or regulatory solutions to all of those. You need to know what they are, to identify them up front. And I think that what's really interesting from my vantage point, at EY and working with, many of the world's largest companies, is seeing the appetite and the excitement level at a very high level, C-suite level, CEO level of really big brand name companies who want to know, what is the impact for them? What is the impact for how they run their business, operationally, as well as for their customers and for the things that they provide to the marketplace. I mean, these are the conversations that are happening across every sector of the economy. And I think that I just think it's going to be a very good time to be an innovator and an investor and an executive focused on these issues. And no one is no one is exempt from it. It doesn't matter if you sell refrigerators, whether you fly airplanes, whether you're a teacher in a school. It really doesn't matter. I mean, the ability to leverage these devices and all the data they provide, the ability to share and transmit, it just takes it all to another level. So we're pretty, I'm pretty excited about that. And I think my colleagues on the phone, on this call and this panel also see the opportunity to provide services and solve problems for our clients around the world. So it's a great new chapter.
Keith, at the C-suite level, with the folks that you're dealing with and advising and consulting with, you were talking about the importance of knowing operationally how you might be able to deal with these smart devices in an intelligent way. Do you think that companies are cognizant enough of the fact that they're going to need to train people, how to turn off their Connect or their smart TV or whatever else might be watching them once they've built into the terms of service the warnings and advisories that that's what these devices do. This is how we're going to make it effective for you. We're going to gather all this information for you. We're going to make it so convenient for you. You're going to love it. And you're agreeing to it by using the device. And of course, people don't read those things. Do you think that they're also paying attention to the backlash and the PR problems they'll have if people wake up? There's this good article over at Network World about a guy who was quite terrified by his smart TV because he delved in and read the 46-page privacy policy that came with it. His name was Michael Price. He is counsel in the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at your alma mater, the NYU School of Law. And he did a detailed blog entry on what exactly his smart TV was giving itself permission to do, which made him quite terrified of the whole Internet of Things phenomenon. So circling back to my question to you, Keith, do you think that executives in these companies are bearing in mind that they're going to have to show people how to turn these things off and use them in a way that makes sense for the consumer?
Well, this is definitely one of the less glamorous sides of disruptive innovation. I remember when tablets, the current generation of tablet computing started to take off around 2010, 2011. There were a lot of big companies that ran out and bought tens of thousands of these tablets and started to hand them out to executives and those in the field long before they had updated their privacy policies, their cybersecurity policies. They didn't have really any apps to put on the tablet. I mean, it was essentially just this really cool device that they decided we need to have it, and we'll figure out its value after the fact. And frankly, a lot of them, those programs failed. A lot of those corporately purchased devices within a year became personally owned devices, and you didn't see a lot of that repeated until 2 years later when some more sophistication came around. And I think it's the same thing is true here. By and large, companies need to understand what the value that they're going to get before they run out and acquire these devices, or rather create these networks and grids. And along with that is also the talent, the change management, the training, the policy upgrades, all the things you're referring to. I think companies are very sophisticated. Large companies are very sophisticated when it comes to deploying things like enterprise ERP systems and so forth. They spend months and months planning for these things. They put business cases together and deploy very large teams, mapped against very significant project plans. They get it, but when it comes to this, I think there's still a lot of awareness building. There's a lot of just understanding that this isn't just about a device or a connection or a camera. It's about the order of magnitude of those things out there and the implications. And I suspect that no, they won't. By and large, they won't. Most of my clients are excited and anticipating and evaluating it, but because it's so new, unless you're an Internet of Things company right now, like one of the connected thermostats or something of that nature, by and large, you probably don't have a full grasp of all the issues you're going to have to deal with. But I think that's part of the journey, right? I mean, that's where we are today, and they're just going to have to get there one step at a time.
Just like we get through this show one step at a time, and we have some resources and a tip to give you to round out the show. But before we do that, we have one final sponsor to thank. That is FreshBooks. And this is a great time of year to be talking about FreshBooks. end of the year when you need to get your accounts in and on your books, and when it's easy to convince your clients to pay you, because then it goes on their books for this tax year, which is a good thing. They don't have to wait to put that expense on their taxes. So if you're still using Word or Excel to create those invoices that you need to get yourself paid, you've got to try FreshBooks. It's the easiest way to invoice clients, organize expenses, and track your time online. With FreshBooks award-winning mobile apps, you can do it all from anywhere on your Android or iOS devices. Billing clients for the first time has never been easier. You just open the FreshBooks app on your phone, start the timer, and go. I use this in my law practice. It's wonderful. I'm a sole practitioner, so I have not the staff or the time or the inclination to make this work well, but FreshBooks makes it work well. I don't need an accounting department or secretary to handle my billings, because FreshBooks does it well, does it professionally, does it seamlessly. That's what you want in this kind of service, right? You don't want to have to think about it. You want it to just do the job and do it well. And that has been, from get-go, my experience with FreshBooks. It's built to support growing businesses. On average, FreshBooks customers double their revenue in the first 24 months. You'll spend less time on paperwork, freeing up to 2 days a month to focus on the work you love. Easily, you can invoice your clients from your desk or on the go. In fact, FreshBooks customers are paid an average of 5 days faster than people using other kinds of tools to manage their billing software. Avoid those awkward emails and phone calls to your late paying clients, because there's an automatic late payment reminder that you can go ahead and turn on to help you get paid faster. FreshBooks integrates with over 50 apps to help you run your practice, things like MailChimp, Zen Payroll, Google Apps, and many more. FreshBooks award-winning support is always free, and you speak to a real live human being every time. Yay! So you've got to try FreshBooks. It's going to be free for you, 30 days with no obligation. Go to freshbooks.com/twill and enter This Week in Law in the How Did You Hear About Us section when you're signing up. Start your 30-day free trial today. Go to freshbooks.com/twill, and don't forget to enter This Week in Law when they ask you how you heard about us. Thank you so much, FreshBooks, for your support of This Week in Law. All right, as per usual, ending the show, we're going to give you a resource and a tip. The resource, we didn't talk much about the journalistic uses of drones, except for that when you're driving down a freeway, you better expect to be captured by either the helicopter or maybe someday soon the drone following the freeway traffic jam that you're in. I think that that actually is a really big area where we're going to see legal development and concern the use of drones in journalism, as we touched on when talking about California's new technology privacy law. Following around celebrities or others in order to do stories on them is just one way in which this comes up. So if you are a journalist or engaged in any sort of journalistic activity, if that is not your professional concern, you might want to check out this resource. The University of North Carolina's Center for Media Law and Policy has a great page on drone journalism and the law, including recent case law. There's not much of it. Information from the U.S. government, an overview of drones and drone journalism, some talk about the ethics of using drones in journalism, and a whole big section on privacy and the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. It'll also tell you other schools studying drone journalism. So if this is your thing, this is a great resource for you to check out. And then our tip, it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek one. But I thought this was just kind of funny. Google, of course, is just one of many companies doing research on using drones in their business, and they have a research lab called Google X, of course. It is, as The Atlantic calls it, the company's woe-inducing long-range research lab. And our tip is, if you want to be the head of that very cool program, it helps if you're named Astro, because that's his name, Astro Teller. So if you want to learn more about Google's research lab, head on over to that Atlantic article that we've included in the discussion points. You can check out that and everything else we've talked about today at delicious.com/thisweekinlaw/284, because that's the episode that we've done today. And we've just had so much fun. I think we're going to fly this well-manned, non-flying drone on out of your lives and let everyone get on with their weekend. But not before I thank our amazing panel. Keith, it's been so fun having you on the show today. I'm so glad we were able to put this together.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. It was a privilege to be on, as well as the other panelists. It's a really good show.
David Frankel, doing great work toward responsible droning, and one of many drone lawyers out there, observing that this is right, a ground zero kind of place for the practice of law right now. We've had so much fun chatting with you, David.
Thank you, Denise. I should also mention Keith and I are both from NYU Law School. We didn't know that until this call.
There we go. It's a great place. I thought about going there. Life would have been quite different, I think, if I'd spent 3 years in New York, one of those paths not taken. And Terry Miller, such a great opportunity to meet you. Love the work that you're doing. I had no idea that drone insurance was also undergoing a huge burgeoning time in our lives, but clearly that makes perfect sense to me now.
Yeah, most people don't find insurance all that exciting, so we kind of fly under the radar. No pun intended.
Yes, exactly.
But I'd like to thank you, Denise. This was a pleasure. Keith, thanks for recommending me. And David, it was a pleasure meeting you as well. I've seen a lot of the things that you've written, and it's just been a great experience. Thanks, Denise.
I just want to say I so appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Obviously, we're talking about an issue that is very wide open, and there is much to come. And it's because of the people like you and the great thought and consideration that you're giving to the hard issues of the kind we've discussed today that hopefully good things will happen without too many bad things happening in this area. So I really want to thank you for your thought and energies along these lines.
Thank you.
So welcome. And I want to thank everyone who's tuned in to join us this week for this show. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you've been joining us live, that means you've joined us at 11 o'clock Pacific time at 1900 UTC this time of year. That's when we record live at twit.tv. But we love it when you join us live. That's such a fun thing for us to have a live audience following along. But don't worry about it if you can't make it. You can catch up with us later on. You can find us at twit.tv/twill. You can find us on YouTube and on Roku, probably on most smart TVs once you get through reading their 46-page long privacy policy. So we just love to have you join us however you can, wherever you can. We really do appreciate your contributions to the show, which often come in the form of folks looking me up on Twitter and sending me great links. I'm D Howell over there, so please keep that up. We have a Google Plus page and a Facebook page for the show too, if you prefer a bit more length or those formats to getting in touch. You can also email me. I'm Denise at twit.tv. Great way to suggest topics or add to what we've already discussed. Let me know about people you think we should have on the show. That's always helpful too. And just shoot the breeze. Correct my grammar. That's always fun. And I do mean that because I'm constantly learning on this show, not only about the legal aspects, but about everything we do. We really appreciate your feedback. We're so glad that you care enough to give it to us. So we will see you next week on the show. We hope you fly safely. Until then, take care.